Welcome back. Today we are doing our last boil of the year for maple syrup, and I just kind of wanted to do a video recapping what we learned as our first year doing maple syrup. We ended up boiling about 50-ish gallons from 8 trees, really 7 because one didn't produce really anything at all, and it all turned out really good. I was really happy with the experience. There was definitely a little bit of a learning curve, but none of it's really that difficult. It just takes time. So one of the first and maybe the most important thing that I learned is how to do the fire. When I was started, I have a rack in there, a fireplace rack, and I'd stack a few logs on that, and it'd get that burning. But if you have like big, reasonably large rounds or reasonably large split rounds, even, you get a lot of coals, but not a lot of flames. And the flames are kind of what I feel like are necessary to really get a good rolling boil, especially if you're going to try to get the front one to boil. If you want to get the front to boil, you need to get some mega flames in there, like serious flamage. And the best way I found to do that is to either like shove something like pine needles. Pine needles will get this thing ripping, but you need a ton of them. But I shoved a bunch of pine needles in here, and that would get this thing just ripping. But now what I'm doing is I'm splitting my wood up real small, maybe like two inches or less, and then stacking it up in this kind of log cabin effect, and getting that fire real close to the bottom of the pans. Because also, if you get a lot of flamage, but it's real low, you're not getting real good heat up to the bottom of the pans. I also learned that this thing just burns the best when the door's open. If I just leave the door open, it burns so much better. I have a blower with this tube here that blows air in, but it does almost nothing compared to just leaving the door wide open and letting her eat. But the problem with that is you get more ash into your sap while you're boiling. Not really a big deal. You filter it anyway, so I don't get it 100% on this. I'll get it I get it down most of the way, and then I'll take it inside and I'll boil it down the rest of the way there. So before I bring it aside, when I'm almost done boiling, I'll filter it, and then when we're done, I'll filter it again for a final time. And we've been getting clear syrup with no real issues, so that's how I found that works the best for us anyway. Alright, now for the pans. So the back pan is always going to be your hottest pan. And if you kind of can preheat with the front one, and then use like a cup or a ladle or whatever you want to move sap from this to the back, you can get this front one to boil. But what I found is the best is to keep only about 2 or 3 inches in this back pan. If you fill this back one up all the way, it'll get to a rolling boil, but it does not seem to go down nearly as fast as if you only have a few inches in there. So it's best to keep like a few inches in the back pan, and then use the front pan mainly as a preheat, but you can get that to boil if you get your fire going good. I had that boiling earlier, and then I took a break and came back and had to stoke the fire again, so that will boil again. But yeah, I'm right now I'm due to probably actually take some out of the front and put it in there. I've just been using a plastic cup, less than ideal. Like a ladle or a measuring cup would be a lot better because it gets a little heated with the plastic cups. So I'm gonna shift some of my sap from my preheat to my boil pan here. There's no exact science to this. I mean, it doesn't really matter too much. If you just try to maintain the level in the back, that's kind of the best. You can see our back pan starting to get a little dark. This batch was probably about 9 gallons or so, and I suspect this will take me probably 2.5 or 3 hours to boil it till it's ready to go inside on the stove. Once I get down to about maybe 2 gallons or less, that's when we'll filter it and take it inside to finish it off. I don't finish it off on here because This can be a little bit hard to control nicely when you're boiling. You know, you can get this thing ripping and then all of a sudden it's not boiling at all and things can just go real fast, and I just feel like it's easy to lose it when you're boiling it on this. But when you bring it, if you bring it on, put it on a stove, it's a lot more controlled and a lot easier to get it to exactly where you want it to be. So it may not look like this needs any firewood right now. I mean, that looks like it's going pretty good, but trust me, it needs it.
I don't need it. I don't need it. I don't need it. I need it!
If it fits, it ships. So
If it fits, it ships anywhere in the country for a low flat.
we're gonna send it. This is about the size that I like to put in here. You know, our firewood is also not the best quality. You know, if you had some like dry oak, seasoned oak, you'd probably be a lot better off than what we're using. But it will work. You just gotta put it small and you gotta feed it like you wouldn't believe. So now you can see here we got the front one boiling as well. So it is definitely possible to get that front one to a rolling boil. It helps to keep the fire in the front and keep the fire tall. And then you can get that front one to boil. Alright, it's getting dark out. But there's one thing that I remembered that I forgot to mention was the stack. I should have made this taller and I could just get another extension for it, just haven't done it yet. But it'll help with draft, but more importantly, this smoke is right at eye level. So it will blow the smoke right into your eyes.
Aye, aye! All right.
And that's no fun. But since it's getting dark, I probably won't be able to show filtering this. So I'll see you when we get inside. Alright, we moved inside here, and we're down to probably an inch and a half or so in this pot. And you can see now that it's getting closer because the bubbles are real small. As it gets boiled down more and more, the bubbles start at this big kind of rolling boil, and then as it gets farther and farther, they start turning smaller and smaller, and then when it starts to get real close, this will start to get super foamy. Like it'll start to want to foam over this whole pan, even with just that little bit in there. So that's a good sign to know that you're getting close. Alright, so you can see that we got the big foam going on. So that means we are starting to ready to get testing here. I find that I like the hydrometer way better than testing the temperature. I don't even check the temperature. It just seems like to me that it doesn't seem like it's accurate enough. This gives you a pretty definitive reading every time. You fill this up, not all the way to the top because otherwise it just spews out. I like to keep a plate next to my pan because it's easy to spill this and then it's really sticky. So, and you don't want to drop this in there because if you drop it, you got a potential of it hitting the bottom and cracking. It looks like we're floating. We're about at 55, and we are trying to get to about 60. So we got a little bit of time left, but it is close. Hydrometers have two lines on it. The top red line is for if you're testing this when it's hot, and the bottom is you're testing if it's not hot, cold. This is our second test here. And I don't know if you can see this, but that's pretty good. We're actually maybe a touch, just a touch over. Okay, we're ready to filter. I like to let this cool down until it's less than 180 degrees before I filter, to help with the sugar sands so you don't get those in the bottom of your jars. And then you really should reheat it before you actually finally do put it in your final containers, because you kind of want to be above 180 to can it or put it in your jar or whatever you're going to put it in to keep it sealed. But if you can filter below 180, I think you get a better product. So I like to filter it. I put it into these small jars here, and then after I'll reheat it again and put it into smaller containers that we'll actually use like in the fridge. I always have some sketchy setup to do this because I'm typically doing this part by myself. I don't use a pre-filter for my final filtering. I only pre-filter during right after my boil. This has already been filtered once, so it doesn't really need a pre-filter. And it goes a lot faster without one, so. This process can be quite slow, especially if you have a bunch of this to do. Oh, shoot. Got another jar ready when this one's full. Okay, I think we're about ready for the swap. It's pretty smooth. Occasionally that doesn't go as smooth. This is a lot darker. So this is our final batch. Our first batch. Here's one from our first batch. So you can see the difference. Throughout the year it gets darker and darker. I mean, this is like almost black. And we boiled this for less time. And usually if you boil it for less, it's usually lighter, but still ended up way darker than this was our first batch. So I think that about does it for this video. Looks like we're probably going to get about 1.5 of these jars. Maybe a touch over a half. 1.5 of these jars out of, I think that was about 8 gallons or so of sap. You know, overall I'd say this is a good project to do. If you just want to learn something, or if you got a couple trees in your backyard or something you want to do, I think it's a great thing to do. Maybe do it with your kids, or do it with some family or neighbors or friends. It gets you together, it gets you talking, and it's really not hard to do. And you can do it on the cheap if you want to. You can do it for much less money. I mean, you basically just need a pan and some fire, and you can make this. You don't really have to get crazy with it, especially if you're not going to give it away or try to sell it or something. If you're just using it for yourself, you really do not have to get fancy with this. But I typically like to go overboard with everything. I always do. So this year we started off kind of small. We only had 8 taps, but I could probably have put out 60 or 70 taps, but I wouldn't have had the time to boil it. So next year I think I'm going to upgrade my evaporator to something a little larger, and maybe upgrade our filter system a little bit, and tap maybe 20 or 30 trees next year and see how that goes.